In this lecture, we're going to talk about classes in TypeScript. Now, my assumption is that you already know what a class is because you've gone through the object-oriented programming section of the course. So we're just going to look at how TypeScript differs from ES6 classes and how we can use them in TypeScript. So let's go ahead and create a class. So class, my class. Just going to call it my class, and we're going to put a constructor on it. And so far, we're looking exactly like an ES6 class. Let's go ahead and create an instance of this class. And this class does absolutely nothing. There is nothing on it that we can access. So in ES6, you could add a property to this class by saying this.name or whatever you wanted and putting it on the class. But this will say that name doesn't exist on the type my class. So the issue is that we need to actually define that in TypeScript. So we could say public name string here, and now we've defined that property. There's another way that you can do this. So I could take this off of here and actually put it on the constructor itself. And even though we didn't define it out here, it still is going to be available to us. We need to change our instance here to pass something in. And we probably would want to change this to actually set it to that value. But now it's still going to be available to us whenever we are using the class. All right, so that's how we could add properties and fields on classes in TypeScript. So it's slightly different than JavaScript, but it's pretty close to the same. We just need to make sure that we actually define it rather than just adding it to the class. So another thing that's different in TypeScript that you can do, let's just put a method on here. We have public, let's just say it's get name. Or just return this.name. And I took name off, so I'm going to add that back. So in this case, we don't actually have to set it in here because if we pass it in, TypeScript will automatically set it. So the way that we were doing it before, we don't really have to do it here unless we define it outside of the constructor. So whenever we create this, let's just take a look. So we'll say my class dot get name, and let's run this and see what happens. So we run it, we get Matt down here. The reason for that is that even though we're passing this in, it's still TypeScript is internally setting this value for us. So we don't actually have to say like this.name equals name. This is actually happening for us. All right, and we have these public and private modifiers that we can put on our properties, fields, methods, whatever. So in this case, we have a public get name, meaning that we can access it from the instance. But if we change this to private, we can no longer access it from outside of the class. So we could access it internally. So we had another method here. We'll just call it my method. From in here, we can access get name, but we can't access it from outside of the class itself. So that's how private and public work. Another thing that we can do is that we can make this class abstract. So you probably won't use abstract classes in your everyday applications, but in frameworks and libraries, you'll see abstract classes used quite a bit. So like in React, the React.component is an abstract class, which you'll use a lot whenever you use React with TypeScript. But you can't instantiate that itself. So what we're seeing down here now that we made it abstract is we cannot create an instance of an abstract class. All that you can do with an abstract class is extend it. So this says that we can now say like my new class extends my class. So this is inheritance. And then down here, we would change this to new class, and now everything works as expected. We can call that my method here, and it'll work. So it's a little bit different than an interface, where an interface is a contract that you have to follow whenever you're creating your class. Whenever you use an abstract class, it can provide some implementation details as well, like this my method that's on here that could actually do something. So I could say console.log, this.name. And now whenever I call this here, this is going to actually happen. So let me change this so we can see. And we'll change this to will. And we'll see that it actually is working from the extended class because we have implemented it, and then the abstract class has provided us these implementation details that we're using. So it's different than an interface in that way. You probably won't use them that often unless you are creating a framework or something like that. But just wanted to make sure that you were aware that they are there. So go ahead and play around with classes in TypeScript, and then we're going to move on to some other more advanced things in TypeScript in the coming lectures. So I'll see you soon.